Hey everybody, this is Stacy Hoodoo Goddess, and I'm going through a list of notes I got from my clients and emails. Um, this is actually from a mother who will remain anonymous. She has a series of spiritual gifts that run in the family, and she wants to figure out how to bind her children um, spiritually until they get older. She doesn't want their gifts to interfere with their childhood. She wants to wait until they're mature enough to understand what's going on. I know a lot of parents um, have figured out their own way to explain their spiritual practices to their children. And there are some people where it runs in the family and people may not be living in such a friendly environment. I've heard of people had relatives take them to court to take your children for their practices. So I could definitely understand why some people may want to keep things on the down low, and when their children have gifts that start to show, they may fear for them, fear for the judgment, fear for possibly losing them. So that's a good question. How do you suppress these things? Well, you'd have to do a binding on your child. So you have two options, and you'd have to do a binding on your child, and you'd also have to do a hypnotism, find a hypnotherapist to do so, to put it deep within their consciousness. So there's three ways to suppress. You can either bind them spiritually, you can hypnotize them, or you can traumatize them. I would prefer you not traumatize your own child. That's happened to a lot of people who maybe some gifts skip generations, and when it resurfaces, the family typically wants to keep it a secret so the community doesn't find out. So a lot of times people will be traumatized into suppressing their gifts from when they're younger. Some may even when they're older, they'll be traumatized enough where they lose the ability. Well, on the surface level, it's still there, but their surface consciousness loses the ability to recognize, what's going on. They just kind of stuff it deep inside of them. So for children, I don't recommend traumatizing them. That's not a good idea. There's enough stuff in the world. Binding can be done spiritually, and hypnotherapy is also an option. Although it's kind of odd to go to a hypnotherapist who are typically trained. Well, the ones that I have known of have been trained, in psychology with Western philosophy, and going and saying, hey, I want you to hypnotize my kid to forget about how to blah, 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 blah. That's going to be an awkward conversation. I do believe there are hypnotists who can help with that. A binding would be the simplest and easiest thing to do. And I know the person asking this question has already reached out to me, and we will be looking for, and the bindings that you do can have time limits. Like you don't have to have it permanently be bind. You don't have to permanently bind your kids. You can make them for a certain time zone, like how long you want them to be unaware. That's why, unfortunately, a lot of people who study the occult, they put it in the movies. There are a lot of writers and creative people who put this knowledge in movies where people reach a certain birth date and then they all of a sudden start to see things. You can do that. Like you can legitimately program certain things to awaken, to be activated at certain times. So I will be working with her um, to deal with that in a child-friendly manner in terms of a binding of the gift, not the person, but the gift on a conscious level. So if anybody watching knows of someone who has this issue, they don't know how to handle it, they don't think they're going to be able to get help, message me and ask me, for my input for your personal situation, because nothing is the same. Um, and if you need help with the binding, then just message me and we can talk about like what kind, how long, all that. But she's working with a really young child, so it's gonna be for from I think he's like 5 years old till she thinks she wants it until he's about 17, 17. And other relatives are like, no, 30, So trying to figure out how long to bind your kid, without feeling like, okay, you're robbing them of their gifts, because the kid's still young enough that he doesn't know what's going on. So you definitely need to work out those details and be willing to accept the consequences later on when that kid gets older and it's like, yo, now I have to deal with this. I could have worked at this when I was younger. Why would you take this away from me? So be ready to have that conversation when the time comes. It can be awkward. So yeah, it's something that I'm working on with her now. I will be going through more questions from my clients. Typically, once you do working with me, you can request, videos. Of course, you can do it in the comments as well, but a lot of times it's helpful to figure out what are people really dealing with. So I'm going to look through the rest of my questions and keep doing videos based off of what my clients want me to share. Share the knowledge, share what's going on in the world. So definitely, if you have this issue, if you want to suppress it, you have to make sure you know how long for the binding. As for hypnotism, I have not personally hypnotized anyone. I don't specialize in that in particular, but I do know people who have had it done or who do know hypnotherapists, and they say it works. It works really well. So you just kind of got to pick what you think is best for you. Traumatization, a lot of people I know who've been traumatized into losing it, um, typically it happened against their will by relatives when they were younger. I'd never recommend that as a course of action. So, definitely subscribe, like, and share. And I'll be seeing